Part 2 of reading from The Golden Bough by JG Frazer. We got cut off by my feckin' iPhone storage again, and I can't. It says you need to delete, apps and all sorts of things, but it won't let you delete anything. It's weird. It's been like that for a few days now. It's just some glitch in my phone, am I right? I don't know how to remedy it, so it's kind of driving me crazy. But anyway, I'm back in the room, as so to speak. Psychedelic Dream is still strutting his stuffed babies, and I'm going to continue reading, but filming on my laptop, which is why I look sick and half dead and like a ghost, because the camera on my laptop hasn't got very good colour resolution, unfortunately. So, yeah, working with what I've got as opposed to what I haven't got, which is a lot. So, making the impossible possible, as I often do. So, we were reading from The Public Expulsion of Evils, chapter 56, and we were in, where were we? I've lost it. Completely lost the plot, man. We were in number 2, The Occasional Expulsion of Evils. I might even start from that whole paragraph, because since we're split up, you're not going to remember exactly where we were, and it's just going to confuse everyone, including me. And Mama T does not like being confused or discombobulated or deceived or lied to or put into some kind of state of unreality. I have to have everything coherent. Otherwise, I get very stressed and at times distressed, and even if things get really fucking cray-cray, suicidal ideation. So we don't want to go there. I have to keep things copacetic. So let's go. We're on page 717, number 2. I'll read from the beginning because we've just chopped up all over the place. The occasional expulsions of evil. We can therefore understand why those general clearances of evil to which from time to time the savage resorts should commonly take the form of a forcible expulsion of devils. In these evil spirits, primitive man sees the cause of many, if not of most of his troubles, and he fancies that if he can only deliver himself from them, things will go better with him. That's why we occasionally smudge our houses, am I right, and cleanse and put salt down and say prayers and wash the floors with salt water and chase the demons out of the house and do little house clearings. I have to do that fairly regularly actually, but my house has been very quiet in recent months, which is good. I haven't had any activity, which is good. Things are peaceful and calming down. I did have that run of really bad luck in July through to August, which was a bit astonishing, quite frankly. But seems to have calmed down a little bit now. I mean, I'm paying off the fine and fighting my way through out of that. Once that fine's paid, I will take it that all that awfulness is finished and completed, and hope that it's done for quite a long time. So where was I? The public attempts to expel the accumulated ills of a whole community may be divided into 2 classes, according as the expelled evils are immaterial and invisible, or are embodied in a material vehicle or scapegoat. The former may be called the direct or immediate expulsion of evils, the latter the indirect or mediate expulsion, or the expulsion by scapegoat. We begin with the examples of the former. In the island of Rook, between New Guinea and New Britain, when any misfortune has happened, all the people run together scream, curse, howl, and beat the air with sticks to drive away the devil who was supposed to be the author of the mishap. From the spot where the mishap took place, they drive him step by step to the sea, and on reaching the shore they redouble their shouts and blows in order to expel him from the island. He generally retires to the sea or to the island of Loton. The natives of New Britain ascribe sickness, drought, the failure of crops, and in short all misfortunes to the influence of wicked spirits. So at times, when many people sicken and die, as at the beginning of the rainy season, all the inhabitants of a district, armed with branches and clubs, go out by moonlight to the fields, where they beat and stamp on the ground with wild howls till morning, believing that this driven away the devils, and for the same purpose they rush through the village with burning torches. Just set us up a little bit more here. The natives of New Caledonia are said to believe that all evils are caused by a powerful and malignant spirit. Hence, in order to rid themselves of him, they will from time to time dig a great pit round which the whole tribe gathers. After cursing the demon, they fill up the pit with earth and trample on the top with loud shouts. This they call burying the evil spirit. Among the Dieri tribe of Central Australia, when a serious illness occurs, the medicine men expel Kuchi, or the devil, by beating the ground in and around the camp with the stuffed tail of a kangaroo, until they have chased the demon away to some distance from the camp. When a village has been visited by a series of disasters or a severe epidemic, the inhabitants of Minahassa and Celebes lay the blame upon the devils who are infesting the village and who must be expelled from it. Accordingly, early one morning, all the people, men, women, and children, quit their homes, carrying their household goods with them, and take up their quarters in temporary huts which have been erected outside the village. Here they spend several days offering sacrifices and preparing for the final ceremony. At last the men, some wearing masks, others with their faces blackened and so on, but all armed with swords, guns, pikes or brooms, steal cautiously and silently back to the deserted village. Then, at a signal from the priest, they rush furiously up and down the streets and into and under the under the houses, which are raised on piles above the ground, yelling and striking on walls, doors and windows to drive away the devils. Next, the priests and the rest of the people come with the holy fire and march 9 times round each house and thrice around the ladder that leads up to it, carrying the fire with them. Then they take the fire into the kitchen, where it must burn for 3 days continuously. The devils are now driven away, and great and general is the joy. The Alfours of Halmahera attribute epidemics to the devil who comes from other villages to carry them off. So, in order to rid the village of the disease, the sorcerer drives away the devil. From all the villagers he receives a costly garment and places it on 4 vessels, which he takes to the forest and leaves at the spot where the devil was supposed to be. Then, with mocking words, he bids the demon abandon the place. In the Kei or Kai Islands, to the southwest of New Guinea, the evil spirits, who are quite distinct from the souls of the dead, form a mighty host. Almost every tree and every cave is the lodging place of one of these fiends, who are moreover extremely irascible and apt to fly out on the smallest provocation. They manifest their displeasure by sending sickness and other calamities. Hence, in times of public misfortune, as when an epidemic is raging and all other remedies have failed, the whole population go forth with the priest at their head to a place at some distance from the village. Here at sunset they erect a couple of poles with a crossbar between them, to which they attach bags of rice, wooden models of pivot guns, gongs, bracelets, and so on. Then, when everybody has taken his place at the poles and a death-like silence reigns, the priest lifts up his voice and addresses the spirits in their own language as follows: Ho, 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 ye evil spirits who dwell in the trees, ye evil spirits who live in the grottos, ye evil spirits who lodge in the earth, we give you these pivot guns, these gongs, etc. Let the sickness cease, and not so many people die of it. Then everybody runs home as fast as their legs can carry them. On the island of Nias, Nias, when a man is seriously ill and other remedies have been tried in vain, the sorcerer proceeds to exorcise the devil who is causing the illness. A pole is set up in front of the house, and from the top of the pole a rope of palm leaves is stretched to the roof of the house. Then the sorcerer mounts the roof with a pig, which he kills and allows to roll from the roof to the ground. The devil, anxious to get the pig, lets himself down hastily from the roof by the rope of palm leaves, and a good spirit, invoked by the sorcerer, prevents him from climbing up again. If this remedy fails, it is believed that other devils must still be lurking in the house. So a general hunt is made after them. All the doors and windows in the house are closed, except a single dormer window in the roof. The men, shut up in the house, hew and slash with their swords right and left to the clash of gongs and the rubber dub of drums. Terrified at this onslaught, the devils escape by the dormer window and, sliding down the rope of palm leaves, take themselves off. As all the doors and windows except the one in the roof are shut, the devils cannot get into the house again. In the case of an epidemic, the proceedings are similar. Just want to catch last of the light. My goodness. All the gates of the village except one are closed. Every voice is raised, every gong and drum beaten, every sword brandished. Thus the devils are driven out, and the last gate is shut behind them. For 8 days thereafter, the village is in a state of siege, no one being allowed to enter it. When cholera has broken out in a Burmese village, the able-bodied men scramble on the roofs and lay about them with bamboos and billets of wood, while all the rest of the population, old and young, stand below and thump drums, blow trumpets, yell, scream, beat floors, walls, tin pans, everything to make a din. This uproar, repeated on 3 successive nights, is thought to be very effective in driving away the cholera demons. When smallpox first appeared among the Kumis of southeastern India, they thought it was a devil come from Arakan. The villages were placed in a state of siege, no one being allowed to leave or enter them. A monkey was killed by being dashed on the ground, and its body was hung at the village gate. Its blood, mixed with small river pebbles, was sprinkled on the houses. The threshold of every house was swept with the monkey's tail, and the fiend was adjured to depart. When an epidemic is raging on the Gold Coast of West Africa, the people will sometimes turn out, armed with clubs and torches, to drive the evil spirits away. At a given signal, the whole population begin with frightful yells to beat in every corner of the houses, and then rush like mad into the streets waving torches and striking frantically in the empty air. The uproar goes on till somebody reports that the cowed and daunted demons have made good their escape by a gate of the town or village. The people stream out after them, pursue them for some distance into the forest, and warn them never to return. The expulsion of the devils is followed by a general massacre of all the cocks in the village or town, lest by their unseasonable crowing they should betray to the banished demons the direction they must take to return to their old homes. When sickness was prevalent in a Huron village, and all other remedies had been tried in vain, the Indians had recourse to the ceremony called Lo Nui Roya, which is the principal invention and most proper means, so they say, to expel from the town or village the devils and evil spirits which cause, induce, and import all the maladies and infirmities which they suffer in body and mind. Accordingly, one evening, the men would begin to rush like madmen about the village, breaking and upsetting whatever they came across in the wigwams. They threw fire and burning brands about the streets, and all night long they ran howling and singing without cessation. Then they all dreamed of something, a knife, a dog, skin, or whatever it might be, and when morning came they went from wigwam to wigwam asking for presents. These they received silently till the particular thing was given them which they had dreamed about. On receiving it they uttered a cry of joy and rushed from the hut amid the congratulations of all present. The health of those who received what they had dreamed of was believed to be assured, whereas those who did not get what they had set their hearts upon regarded their fate as sealed. Sometimes, instead of chasing the demon of disease from their homes, savages prefer to leave him in peaceable possession, while they themselves take to flight and attempt to prevent him from following in their tracks. Thus, when the Patagonians were attacked by smallpox, which they attributed to the machinations of an evil spirit. They used to abandon their sick and flee, slashing the air with their weapons and throwing water about in order to keep off the dreadful pursuer. And when after several days' march they reached a place where they hoped to be beyond his reach, they used by way of precaution to plant all their cutting weapons with the sharp edges turned towards the quarter from which they had come, as if they were repelling a charge of cavalry. Similarly, when the Lules or Tonacotus Indians of the Gran Chaco were attacked by an epidemic, they regularly sought to evade it by flight, but in so doing they always followed a sinuous, not a straight course, because they said that when the disease made after them, he would be so exhausted by the turnings and windings of the route that he would never be able to come up with them. Charlie, hop off. That's it. Move your tushy. When the Indians of New Mexico were decimated by smallpox or other infectious disease, they used to shift their quarters every day, retreating into the most sequestered parts of the mountains, and choosing the thorniest thickets they could find, in the hope that the smallpox would be too afraid of scratching himself on the thorns to follow them. When some Chins on a visit to Rangoon were attacked by cholera, they went about with drawn swords to scare away the demon, and they spent the day hiding under the bushes so that he might not be able to find them. Number 3. The periodic expulsion of evils. The expulsion of evils from being occasional tends to become periodic. It comes to be thought desirable to have a general riddance of evil spirits at fixed times, usually once a year, in order that the people may make a fresh start in life, freed from all the malignant influences which have been long accumulating about them. Some of the Australian blacks annually expelled the ghosts of the dead from their territory. The ceremony was witnessed by the Reverend W. Ridley on the banks of the river Barwon. A chorus of 20 old and young was singing and beating time with boomerangs. Suddenly, from under a sheet of bark darted a man with his body whitened by pipe clay, his head and face coloured with lines of red and yellow, and a tuft of feathers fixed by means of a stick 2 feet above the crown of his head. He stood 20 minutes, perfectly still, gazing upwards. An Aboriginal who stood by told me he was looking for the ghosts of dead men. At last he began to move very slowly, and soon rushed to and fro at full speed, flourishing a branch as if to drive away some foes invisible to us. When I thought this pantomime must be almost over, 10 more, similarly adorned, suddenly appeared from behind the trees, and the whole party joined in a brisk conflict with their mysterious assailants. At last, after some rapid evolutions, in which they put forth all their strength, and they rested from the exciting toil which they had kept up all night, and for some hours after sunrise, they seemed satisfied that the ghosts were driven away for 12 months. They were performing the same ceremony at every station along the river, and I am told it is an annual custom. Certain seasons of the year mark themselves naturally out as appropriate moments for a general expulsion of devils. Such a moment occurs toward the close of an Arctic winter, when the sun reappears on the horizon after an absence of weeks or months. Accordingly, at Point Barrow, the most northerly extremity of Alaska and nearly of America, the Eskimo, spelt the French way, interesting, choose the, and also it's kind of a racial slur. We know that those people are called the Inuit, but anyway, it's from 1922, so you've got to work with it. The Eskimo choose the moment of the sun's reappearance to hunt the mischievous spirit tuna from every house. The ceremony was witnessed by the members of the United States Polar Expedition who wintered at Point Barrow. A fire was built in front of the council house, and an old woman was posted at the entrance to every house. The men gathered round the council house, while the young women and girls drove the spirit out of every house with their knives, stabbing viciously under the bunk and deerskins, and calling upon tuna to be gone. When they thought he had been driven out of every hole and corner, they thrust him down through the hole in the floor and chased him into the open air with loud cries and frantic gestures. I wonder what that was for a moment. Meanwhile, the old woman at the entrance of the house made passes with a long knife in the air to keep him from returning. Each party drove the spirit towards the fire and invited him to go into it. All were, by this time, drawn up in a semicircle round the fire. When several of the leading men made specific charges against the spirit, and each after his speech brushed his clothes violently, calling on the spirit to leave him and go into the fire. 2 men now stepped forward with rifles loaded with blank cartridges, while a third brought a vessel of urine and flung it on the flames. At the same time, one of the men fired a shot into the air, and as the cloud of steam rose, it received the other shot, which was supposed to finish Tunya for the time being. It's just the curtain, Charlie. It's nothing to be afraid of. In late autumn, when storms rage over the land and break the icy fetters by which the frozen sea is as yet but slightly bound, when the loosened floes are driven against each other and break with loud crashes, and when the cakes of ice are piled in wild disorder one upon another, the Eskimo of Baffinland fancy they hear the voices of the spirits who people the mischief-laden air. Then the ghosts of the dead knock wildly at the huts which they cannot enter, and woe to the hapless wight whom they catch. He soon sickens and dies. Then the phantom of a huge, hairless dog pursues the real dogs, which expire in convulsions and cramps at sight of him. All the countless spirits of evil are abroad, striving to bring sickness and death, foul weather and failure in hunting on the Eskimo, or the Inuit. Most dreaded of all these spectral visitants are Sedna, mistress of the netherworld, and her father, to whose share dead Inuit fall. I really can't stand racial slurs. I still do them sometimes from time to time out of ignorance, but when you know, you know. So, Most dreaded of all these spectral visitants. I've already read that, sorry. While the other spirits fill the air and the water, she rises from underground. It is then a busy season for the wizards. In every house you may hear them, singing and praying, while they conjure the spirits seated in a mystic gloom at the back of the hut, which is dimly lit by a lamp burning low. The hardest task of all is to drive away Sedna, and this is reserved for the most powerful enchanter. A rope is coiled on the floor of a large hut in such a way as to leave a small opening at the top, which represents the breathing hole of a seal. 2 enchanters stand beside it, one of them grasping a spear as if he were watching a seal hole in winter, the other holding the harpoon line. A third sorcerer sits at the back of the hut, chanting a magic song to lure Sedna to the spot. Now she is heard approaching under the floor of the hut, breathing heavily. Now she emerges at the hole. Now she is harpooned and sinks away in angry haste, dragging the harpoon with her, while the 2 men hold on to the line with all their might. The struggle is severe, but at last, by a desperate wrench, she tears herself away and returns to her dwelling in Adlivun. When the harpoon is drawn up out of the hole, it is found to be splashed with blood, which the enchanters proudly exhibit as a proof of their prowess. Thus Sedna and the other evil spirits are at last driven away, and next day a great festival is celebrated by old and young in honour of the event. But they must still be cautious, for the wounded Sedna is furious and will seize anyone she may find outside of his hut. So they all wear amulets on the top of their hoods to protect themselves against her. These amulets consist of pieces of the first garments that they wore after birth. The Iroquois inaugurated the new year in January, February or March. The time varied. With a festival of dreams, like that which the Hurons observed on special occasions. The whole ceremonies lasted several days or even weeks and formed a kind of saturnalia. Men and women, variously disguised, went from wigwam to wigwam, smashing and throwing down whatever they came across. It was a time of general licence. The people were supposed to be out of their senses and therefore not to be responsible for what they did. Accordingly, many seized the opportunity of paying off old scores by belabouring obnoxious persons, drenching them with ice-cold water and covering them with filth or hot ashes. Others seized burning brands or coals and flung them at the heads of the first persons they met. Now I'm hot again, by the gods. Because there's very little bloody grammar, I won't remember where I was. Oh dear goddess. Seas, burning brand, front heads. Oh right, found it. The only way of escaping from these persecutors was to guess what they had dreamed of. On one day of the festival, the ceremony of driving away evil spirits from the village took place. Men clothed in the skins of wild beasts, their faces covered with hideous masks, and their hands with the shell of the tortoise, went from hut to hut, making frightful noises. In every hut they took the fuel from the fire and scattered the embers and ashes about the floor with their hands. The general confession of sins which preceded the festival was probably a preparation for the public expulsion of evil influences. It was a way of stripping the people of their moral burdens, that these might be collected and cast out. In September, the Incas of Peru celebrated a festival called Situa, or Situa, Situa, the object of which was to banish from the capital and its vicinity all disease and trouble. The festival fell in September because the rains begin about this time, and with the first rains there was generally much sickness. As a preparation for the festival, the people fasted on the first day of the moon after the autumnal equinox. Having fasted during the day and the night being come, they baked a coarse paste of maize. This paste was made of two sorts. One was kneaded with the blood of children aged from 5 to 10 years, the blood being obtained by bleeding the children between the eyebrows. These two kinds of paste were baked separately because they were for different uses. Each family assembled at the house of the eldest brother to celebrate the feast, and those who had no elder brother went to the house of their next relation of greater age. On the same night, all who had fasted during the day washed their bodies, and taking a little of the blood-kneaded paste, rubbed it over their head, face, breast, shoulders, arms, and legs. They did this in order that the paste might take away all their infirmities. After this, the head of the family anointed the threshold with the same paste and left it there as a token that the inmates of the house had performed their ablutions and cleansed their bodies. Meantime, the high priest performed the same ceremonies in the temple of the sun. As soon as the sun rose, all the people worshipped and besought him to drive all evils out of the city, and then they broke their fast with the paste that had been kneaded without blood. When they had paid their worship and broken their fast, which they did at a stated hour, in order that all might adore the sun as one man, an Inca of the blood royal came forth from the fortress as a messenger of the sun, richly dressed, with his mantle girded round his body and a lance in his hand. The lance was decked with feathers of many hues, extending from the blade to the socket, and fastened with rings of gold. He ran down the hill from the fortress, brandishing his lance, till he reached the centre of the great square, where stood the golden urn, like a fountain, that was used for the sacrifice of the fermented juice of the maize. Here 4 other Incas of the blood royal awaited him, each with a lance in his hand and his mantle girdled up to run. The messenger touched their 4 lances with his lance, and told them that the sun bade them, as his messengers, drive the evils out of the city. The 4 Incas then separated, and ran down the 4 royal roads which led out of the city to the 4 quarters of the world. While they ran, all the people, great and small, came to the doors of their houses, and with great shouts of joy and gladness shook their clothes as if they were shaken like dust, while they cried, "Let the evils be gone! How greatly desired has this festival been by us! O Creator of all things, permit us to reach another year, that we may see another feast like this." After they had shaken their clothes, they passed their hands over their heads, faces, arms and legs, as if in the act of washing. All this was done to drive the evils out of their houses, that the messengers of the sun might banish them from the city. And it was done not only in the streets through which the Incas ran, but generally in all quarters of the city. Moreover, they all danced, the Inca himself among them, and bathed in the rivers and mountains, saying that their maladies would come out of them. Then they took great torches of straw, bound round with cords. These they lighted and passed from one to the other, striking each other with them, and saying, "Let all harm go away." Meanwhile the runners ran with their lances for a quarter of a league outside the city, where they found 4 other Incas ready, who received the lances from their hands and ran with them. Thus the lances were carried by relays of runners for a distance of 5 or 6 leagues, at the end of which the runners washed themselves and their weapons in rivers, and set up the lances in sign of a boundary within which the banished evils might not return. The Negroes of Guinea annually banished the devil from all their towns with much ceremony at a time set apart for the purpose. At Axum on the Gold Coast, this annual expulsion is preceded by a feast of 8 days, during which mirth and jollity, skipping, dancing and singing prevail, and a perfect lampooning liberty is allowed, and scandal so highly exalted that they may freely sing of all the faults, villainies and frauds of their superiors as well as inferiors, without punishment or so much as the least interruption. On the 8th day they hunt out the devil with a dismal cry, running after him and pelting him with sticks, stones, and whatever comes to hand. When they have driven him far enough out of the town, they all return, and this way he is expelled from more than 100 towns at the same time. To make sure that he does not return to their houses, the women wash and scour all their wooden and earthen vessels, to free them from all uncleanness and the devil. At Cape Coast Castle on the Gold Coast, the ceremony was witnessed on the 9th of October 1844 by an Englishman who has described it as follows. Tonight the annual custom of driving the evil spirit Abun Sam out of the town has taken place. As soon as the 8 o'clock gun fired in the fort, the people began firing muskets in their houses, turning all their furniture out of doors, beating about in every corner of the rooms with sticks, etc., and screaming as loudly as possible in order to frighten the devil. Being driven out of the houses as they imagine, they sallied forth into the streets, throwing lighted torches about, shouting, screaming, beating sticks together, rattling old pans, making the most horrible noise in order to drive him out of the town into the sea. The custom is preceded by 4 weeks' dead silence. No gun is allowed to be fired, no drum to be beaten, no palaver to be made between man and man and man. If during these weeks 2 natives should disagree and make a noise in the town, they are immediately taken before the king and fined heavily. If a dog or pig, sheep or goat be found at large in the street, it may be killed or taken by anyone, the former owner not being allowed to demand any compensation. This silence is designed to deceive Abun Sam. Then, being off his guard, he may be taken by surprise and frightened out of the place. If anyone die during the silence, his relatives are not allowed to weep until the 4 weeks have been completed. Sometimes the date of the annual expulsion of devils is fixed with reference to the agricultural seasons. Thus, among the Hos of Togoland in West Africa, the expulsion is performed annually before the people partake of the new yams. The chiefs summon the priests and magicians and tell them that the people are now to eat the new yams and be merry. Therefore they must cleanse the town and remove the evils. Accordingly, the evil spirits, witches, and all the ills that infest the people are conjured into bundles of leaves and creepers fastened to poles, which are carried away and set up in the earth on various roads outside the town. During the following night, no fire may be lit and no food eaten. Next morning, the women sweep out their hearths and houses and deposit the sweepings on broken wooden plates. Then the people pray, saying, "All ye sicknesses that are in our body and plague us, we are come today to throw you out." Thereupon they run as fast as they can in the direction of Mount Adaklu, smiting their mouths and screaming, "Out today! Out today! That which kills anybody! Out today! Ye evil spirits! Out today! And all that causes our heads to ache! Out today! Unlo and Adaklu are the places whither all ill shall betake itself. When they have come to a certain tree on Mount Adaklu, they throw everything away and return home. At Kiriwina in southeastern New Guinea, when the new yams have been harvested, the people feasted and danced for many days, and a great deal of property such as armlets, native money and so forth was displayed conspicuously on a platform erected for the purpose. When the festivities were over, all the people gathered together and expelled the spirits from the village by shouting, beating the posts of the houses, and overturning everything under which a wily spirit might be supposed to lurk. The explanation which the people gave to a missionary was that they had entertained and feasted the spirits and provided them with riches, and it was now time for them to take their departure. Had they not seen the dances and heard the songs and gorged themselves on the souls of the yams and appropriated the souls of the money and all the other fine things set out on the platform? What more could the spirits want? So out they must go. Among the Hos of northeastern India, the great festival of the year is the harvest home held in January, when the granaries are full of grain and the people, who use their own expression, are full of devilry. They have a strange notion that at this period men and women are so overcharged with vicious propensities that it is absolutely necessary for the safety of the person to let off steam by allowing for a time full vent to the passions.